Welcome to the call. We will start with our welcome to country. Great to have everyone here. We've got people from America, from Flavia's here, cool, from Brazil. We have Lumi from Canberra. It's 7 a.m. there, so thank you, Lumi, for being here today. And myself from New Zealand, it's 9 a.m. here. And we'll get this call rolling. So just you all got your mutes on, so that's good. But we're going to do a repeat back response at the end of our meditation. So it is good to have that on mute, otherwise it turns into a cacophony of sound. So close your eyes and get yourself into that space that you call home within yourself. And hold in your mind all the activities of the land that have been going on in the last few days. All the activity of the land that's been going on for the last few years. And all of the activity that's been going on for years and years and years before that. Think to the people that were there before you were there. The indigenous people, the animals in the forest. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands we are joining from, those who lived in harmony with the land, listening and moving within it in deep connection and understanding. If you know the names of these people, hold them in the mind and in your heart now. We acknowledge the loss through colonization, through continued cultural suppression and erasure, that taken lives, land and culture. We acknowledge the deep pain and trauma caused by these events and their continued impacts. We pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging, who continue to carry the wisdom and deep knowledge. We thank them that they may share for all that they share with us, and we seek to listen humbly, heal and learn together. It always has been, always will be Aboriginal and Indigenous land. Sovereignty was never ceded. May we open ourselves to listen and remember our custodian role and do this in harmony. So continue to keep your eyes closed and breathe in some deep breaths. Let's do 5 together. 2. Slow that breathing right down. 3. 4. 5. Yes, I'm going to do 3 more breaths, and I want you to take them down to your toes and down into the ground. Remind yourself that you're rooted here on this earth. And mindfully bring that living energy back to you. Now, if you want to repeat this after me, each line after me. I am loved. I am connected. I breathe in gentleness and breathe out judgment. I am free of guilt and full of stillness. So with freedom of spirit and commitment to community, I see, hear, and feel the universe and bloom life into the future. We are here together to bloom life together. So hold that on your face and give us all a big smile. It's good to have you all here. Cool, now you can just slowly bring yourself back into your body. Maybe you want to do a little wriggle. Welcome to Bloom Network's main focus community call of the month, flipping the mainstream media towards regenerative cultures is our meta theme for the year, and today we're going to be talking about flipping the narrative around climate change. So just a quick blurb before we start with the analysis, and actually there's enough people here to maybe do a quick round of people. So Bloom Network, for those of you who have not been with us before, we're inspiring people to do regenerative acts in the communities where they live and in their workplaces. We're doing that by getting people to set up their own local blooms in their watershed or bioregion areas, and to do all kinds of projects together. We do these monthly calls to kind of disseminate information. This one is a little bit different to some others that we've been doing this year. This one's very much a more brainstorming session with some of your good minds that are here. And we also do two other calls during the month. There's a DWeb call, so those of you who are interested in building a decentralized autonomous network, although we'll get an update from Magenta soon around how we are going on that front. It's very exciting. And we also have a casual call on the last Thursdays of the month, American time, which is just a casual hangout, play some games and be silly. We sometimes have poetry, sometimes play not hangman, but it's like draw a flower land, as we try and guess what each other's professions are. Cool. Magenta, give us an update on the DAO, because I'm sure these people here want to hear that little piece of information.
Sure. For folks who aren't familiar with what a DAO is, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Another way of saying it is a programmable organization. It's a little bit more straightforward. But we are messing around with that technology with Bloom Network in order to try to function as an international cooperative and easily kind of pool resources as an international network, but direct them toward local blooms and any other kinds of projects that we want to work on together. So we have a couple of test DAOs set up using different templates on Aragon, which is one of the platforms that you can build DAOs on. And a few of us are just kind of kicking the tires, getting to know the buttons. It's still really early in the technology development, so it's a little bit clunky to use and getting used to the terms and everything. So every Monday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time, we have a space to come together, and if you want to come see what that's like and test it out, or even just like lurk and watch other people do it, you're welcome to join that. Just ping me at magenta@bloomnetwork.org if you want to join that puddle. And yeah, I imagine we'll be in that phase for a while before we put a real one up. It's like on a test net, so we basically can use like test money to get a sense of what it's like to pool money together and allocate it, and who has permissions on what and that kind of thing. But it basically, what it allows is a little bit more decentralized control of funds, rather than like one or two people having the permission in the organization, like access to our entire bank account. And it allows us to potentially like automate, like down the road, say like 80% of local memberships will go directly to the local Bloom and 20% to the international network, or however we configure that. So that's that. There's a couple of developers who joined that Monday call, and they're there to answer questions, and they're kind of watching us learn too, because we're some of the earliest people that are not developers who are trying to use it. So it's interesting to see like what works and what totally doesn't work. So that's it.
Yay, thank you, Magenta. There are a lot of people in that space who are excited by what we're doing and creating that technology. So it's really great to have this ball rolling, and huge thanks to Magenta, who has been pushing that one forward. It's very exciting. Cool, so let's jump into the call. Now, Meg, you're here. Do you want to introduce yourself? Are you going to co-facilitate with me today? Or no, maybe she's not there. Meg, if you want to jump on, you're just welcome to do that at any time. All right. So I can see that lots of people have got the document open that we are going to be going through. So that's cool. If you don't have that link, it should have been in your email or also in the ticket confirmation for this call. Maybe Magenta can drop it into the chat as well. We would do that. Cool. So the phrase climate change has humanity against several cultural walls. So during this call, we are going to be hosting or facilitating discussion around other phrases that Bloom Network could use to help achieve more effective mobilization. So we're going to have two parts to this call. We're going to analyze the core messages from some key climate change organizations or people who are kind of working in that space or raising money for different initiatives. There's a lot of them out there. We've done a few, but it's obviously a time-consuming process. Then we'll have a brainstorming or lightning storming around what messages do you want to see, what messages are motivating, what messages are going to activate calls to action. And then we'll talk maybe a little bit about how we're going to get these messages out. Now, the reason why we think this is important is because the narrative of how we tell our stories is so intrinsic to the way that we then look at those problems and then unfold the actions that are behind it. What was really interesting in this research was there was one particular group, the Climate Justice Alliance, that also picked up on this need to change the narrative in a really obvious way. So I'm going to just read what they wrote about the narrative from their website. They call it the seeds. They use plant analogies as well. Represented by seeds, we understand the narrative that we understand that all our efforts must begin with the narrative, our story and vision for the world we want and know is possible. Short, medium, and long-term organizing strategy, indeed, entire movements are grown and derived from narratives. As the Center for Story-Based Strategy teaches us, the point is not to tell our own stories better. The point is to change existing stories. The currency of story is not truth, but meaning. As we continue to craft our story of a regenerative economy, we understand through greater meaning, we also establish a greater set of truths. The seed of our narrative forms the roots to weather many storms ahead. That's why we're having this conversation today. Cool. So, as you'll see in this table, everything is done a little bit of color. That's because I'm dyslexic and I work better when things are sectioned into different colors. So I've also stacked these different groups to the kind of focus around the different languages that they were using and the kinds of feelings that they had. Now, obviously, this is my own interpretation of what these websites are saying and the keywords. Me and my own bias, no doubt, will pick out words that mean something to me or adversely I don't like, and so I notice it more. And that is going to be coming through my white, middle-class, female, New Zealand focus lens. So with all that in mind, we'll roll through. So feel free to interject as well, because I don't want to be the only person who's talking through this call. But it might be a good idea. Do we want to go through everything one by one, Magenta, or do we want to talk about it as a group? How many do you end up doing?
It might be helpful to go through a few, but there's probably too many to go through one by one.
Okay, so I'll do the first three together because they were kind of similar. So Greenpeace Global, the Sierra Club, and Co-op America were super focused on recruitment. All of them had multiple donate buttons on their page. I think the maximum I found was 5. As I scrolled through their front, just their homepage, there were 5 different places to donate, 3 places to sign up for your email list, and 3 places to become a member. They really want you. And of course, when you're seeing all that kind of advertising, it really does kind of detract, really, I think, away from the message that they're trying to talk through. So they're using a lot of language like petition, action, protect. Protect, I think most people were using. I didn't end up doing a word cloud for them all. I ran out of time, but we can do that another time. Greenpeace was very like needs. The earth needs this. The earth needs that. The needs. Yeah, maybe that's just what they chose to do. They had 49 articles relating to climate change. Sierra Club was all about being a champion for the environment. So very much that kind of warrior language, if you're familiar with spiral dynamics, and the different kind of languages that you can use to talk to different kind of ways of being. Again, they use protect, give, and then Co-op America, similar kind of feel, all very much focused on decarbonisation as the need, as the key thing to fix in the environment. Worldwide Wildlife Fund was a little bit of a mix. That's why it's orange, because the next set is yellow. So between the red and the orange, between the red of we want your money and the yellow of very, very science-based. Worldwide Wildlife Fund was in the middle there, so they were both asking for recruiting quite heavily, but also a much more science kind of focus. They're screaming at me. Then the next bunch that we have coming through here are all coloured yellow, and these ones are much more science or business focused. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development is really interesting. They do a lot of science-based business solutions to help people transition their businesses. That's quite cool. I did notice that they used a picture of a solar array that is in disrepair now, so that was kind of interesting. And they were very SDG, so Sustainable Development Goals based. The ones that use science were, the tone is really interesting when they're not so focused on that donate thing. The Yale program on climate change and communication, similar kind of deal. Very scientific studies on public opinion and behavior. Their definition of climate change is a scientific, health, political, economic, national security, environmental, moral, and religious issue, among many other things. So they're serious science research crew. Then the next one, the UN program, was very much kind of what the UN does, a little bit dire in their language. And similar with the children's, oh no, that's a little bit further down. Yes, they had 10 key messages to climate change there, but they obviously didn't finish that one, sorry. The next group, I'll just do a quick mention because this one group was interesting. This is a group that has popped up in my hometown. They are following the teaching of Walter Jean, who says that the key understanding of climate change is not through reducing carbon, but through understanding the full hydrological cycle, which has been disrupted by human activity. And we need to be focusing on that hydrological cycle and restoring it, as opposed to just taking carbon out of the atmosphere. So when I was doing the search, I was having a look to see if any of these other groups kind of believed or spoke about that at all. And the only one that kind of mentioned it was that UN environmental program, the key messages, 10 key messages of climate change. The next two in the red are two UN documents, one from the environment, UNEP, and one from UNICEF. I have a background in child-friendly cities, so I did a lot of work alongside UNICEF for a while. So I just wanted to see what their climate change document was about. This was a document, not a website. Super alarmist language, and it's quite distressing to read, actually. And then Climate Justice Alliance, the last few, the ones that are kind of more heading into a future casting, vision casting future. Climate Justice Alliance was the one that was super prominent in its people of colour representation. They're in prominent positions. They're all over the website and the photos. A really beautiful depiction of people working together. And they're very focused on more like a lot of the social justice, as well as understanding that the people on what they call the front lines are the poorer and often people of colour communities, meaning that these places that get more pollution or they have a big rubbish dump there because they get picked on because they are in that demographic. So their organisation is all about helping communities come up with their own plans of resilience because the government's not going to do it. I really liked that website. It was really inspiring. And some of their diagrams and their solutions, they have this thing, I'll just mention quickly, 5 questions, well there's more than 5 questions, but there's like 5 different sections to analyze whether a new Green Deal, like a new regenerative or sustainable project that's coming into your community, you can ask these questions and find out if they really are. So that was a really cool tool in the website to have that there. So I highly recommend you look at in more detail. New Nexus Energy was very tech white language, but clearly diverse in the investment that they're putting into people finding tech solutions to the climate problem. The Permaculture Action Network does not appear to have been updated at all since COVID-19, so I don't think they're having any kind of events right now, which is interesting that is the case. I didn't search through their pictures, so I can't tell you how representative they were. And then resilience.org, I just have to tell you, if you haven't seen this website, I'm sorry if you work for it. It cracked me up a lot because it was like opening a library with urban hipster clickbait. That some of the articles in their thing, it's just like reading a magazine, like 50 Shades of Hay, talking about growing grassroots deeper. What else did we have? Going on an energy diet, and beyond the divides of black and white thinking, to the heart of our wholeness. It just felt like opening up, like a I don't even know any names of those girly magazines anymore, but you open them up and there's a survey there. It was just felt like that. So some good information though, and they're kind of at that lighter end of getting people interested in these kind of topics and getting deeper into that. And then we have Global Regeneration Collab. I didn't do that one. Magenta didn't say anything about that. Read what you wrote.
They're a little bit along the lines of like the kind of clean tech accelerator communities in the sense of focused on collaboration and an accelerator kind of frame. So, and their website is very simple. It's a much more modern take on some of the almost like early 2000s websites of a lot of the climate orgs. So they have it's just like a 1-page scroll that's very simple, and they outline just 3 challenges. There's not a lot of other information there though. They mostly organize through a Slack community. It's like a somewhat semi-closed community. But it's interesting to see how much cleaner kind of visual design that was more spacious as well, because this stuff's like intense to digest. So having a little bit more blank space on the page sometimes helps you like interact with the content a little bit easier when stuff is so loaded as most of the climate stuff is.
Cool. So that's the kind of analysis that we started off with, because I think it's really interesting for us to see just how things are being framed already and what we find inspiring or not inspiring. So I'd really love to now open up the floor, and Magenta is going to take some notes for us. And wanted to start a conversation around what kinds of things stand out to you as being really positive and helpful, and then what kind of things are kind of turning you off and not helpful in this kind of conversation. We can work through that, start a dialogue around what is going on, really. Does that sound good? Feel free to actually quote back some of the stuff that's there on the table. Who's going to be brave and start the conversation?
Anna, you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I can jump in there later. I mean, part of the reason why I'm on the call is I just, I have concerns about kind of like hijacking of terms and greenwashing with even some of the big nonprofits that we've come to grow and love. And I think some of the ones that have some of the alarmist language, you know, those are the ones that might have more money behind them, and they're, I don't know. So I kind of feel like there's, like, I'm a bigger fan of the Climate Justice Alliance and like where their heads at. Whereas like some of the other organizations I've been a little bit concerned about in the last year. Just wondering like what is really going on, and maybe their language is intentional, because those are their intentions, you know. That's just like is kind of driving a certain amount of fear. So anyway, I tend to like what Climate Justice Alliance is putting out, just having, they're just giving a better platform currently, I think, to the BIPOC or Black Indigenous people of color. And on top of words, I don't see in the boxes here kind of like the visuals, but I know that there's been concern in kind of like greenwashing concern groups, you know, like, hey, there's this emphasis sometimes on the, like, technology is going to save us, and the windmills are going to save us, or the solar is going to save us, and not necessarily the like the permaculture and getting our hands dirty and rejuvenating the soil, and so that can be expressed not just in words but in what they're throwing up as an image. So I tend now to be more aware of that, and so people that are talking about soil, and it's like, yes, I feel like that's the direction that we need to go towards, instead of only thinking about tech. That's just my current opinion.
That's great.
That's a very good point about the soil. Ultimately, it's changing our relationship to the planet. That's the overarching narrative, and saying, what does that mean? And instead of driving, as you said, that narrative of fear, making sure that they're inclusive and giving us some language that gets us hopeful and excited, and, you know, puts a really positive, you know, you can do, kind of, you can be part of this kind of spin on it.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Hi, I'm Meg, and I think that this conversation is super important, and I think Hannah touched on it a little bit, and I'm sorry, my audio is giving me trouble now. Of course, a freaking compressor kicked on right next to me, so I'm going to walk away from that. Anyway, I think that the most important thing is for us to create a narrative that is irrefutable. Because the two narratives that have been built up are global warming and climate change. Both things that happen in a natural span of history over the eons. And so that's exactly what's been argued all this time, right? So if you watch old sitcoms, they were talking about like, oh, we only have, 5 years, 10 years. There's all of these alarm bells, okay? So I feel like in this narrative that people are sick of the alarm because the alarm's been being sounded for, ever since I was born. I remember it. So I think that's part of it, is this fatigue around the alarmist perspective, right? That I think that's one of the reasons why people turn away from these narratives and tend to not believe them. And then also just the fact that global warming and climate change are both things that happen in a natural span of time, it implies, granted, we all, people who read and know science, understand that human involvement is increasing and accelerating these things, and that's part of the problem, is in the carbon cycle. But I think that Hannah had a good point with one of the groups that was more interested in the water cycle, right? And educating that. So I think that's part of the key, simply because the carbon cycle is so complicated that the average human can't understand it very well. So I think that is really where I am looking for insights into this conversation, is what is a narrative that is irrefutable? What is something that if the headline came up, it would catch your attention? And how do we as sort of climate-focused organizations come together and agree on that narrative to steer it away from those sort of useless political tropes of, oh, it's always been warming, and the climate's always going to change, and I think when these narratives started, that people who started them, obviously with the best of intentions, couldn't have foreseen that the fossil fuel industry would become the monolith of harm that it is, right? Who would foresee that you would have to craft a narrative that is irrefutable so that people wouldn't want to trash their own planet? But of course, they couldn't have foreseen everything that we have today. It just wasn't possible. So I guess that's my perspective, just to kind of help guide the conversation about, what do you guys think is a narrative that is irrefutable? Because obviously both of those are clearly not working for us at all. All of this time, our entire lives, these narratives are tired and old and political. And so we're starting these conversations because we sort of recognize that one of the problems with the climate in the world is this narrative that it's not working, and people aren't alarmed. They're tired of hearing the alarm. And how do we alarm them? And is alarm the right tactic, I guess? So I wonder if anybody can speak to any of that.
Meg, just to respond to you, is there someone else that wants to speak so that I can?
Yeah, I was just going to add, this is my first meeting. Hi, my name's Rebecca. I think something that comes to mind for me, from what you just spoke to, Meg, was changing our relationship with nature before nature changes its relationship with us. That's the reason that kind of brought me here, is, you know, feeling a disconnection from the world around me. And the more I learn about the relationships that other people have with nature and how that feels within their community and how that's really helped them, I think in terms of like the mental health crisis and this pandemic that leaves a lot of people feeling isolated and concerned. I think just realizing that we've lost this connection to ourselves and to our planet. And yeah, that's just all I wanted to say.
I think that's a really helpful, huge piece of it right there, is for us to foster things that create that connection.
Yeah, I agree with Rebecca. I raised my hand, but what I wanted to say is that Charles Eisenstein uses a lot the narrative of separation that we are currently living, like we are something else apart from nature. And I think once we realize that we are nature, we kind of understand that we need to take care of ourselves and take care of others and other beings, and include other beings in our sense of self. Once we understand that, I think I think once we understand that, it's easier and to realize this dependency on which we live, and codependence, and how we must be responsible for everything we do.
I think those are two super key parts of this. So keep talking, you guys. What is this bringing up for you? And also, how do you feel about the climate change narrative? What does it make you feel when you see somebody who is an alarmist? Janine, did you have something that you were going to add before?
Yeah. I'm getting all confused. I'm like, oh, the hand raising thing. I'm trying to figure this out. Yeah, well, what's coming up for me is the connection, and just like from a very real place of like moving from Southern California suburb to a city, and then now I'm in a rural area of Costa Rica. And even though I've had an environmental nonprofit since 2006, that connection that I've had with nature since we've been here the last 4 years has deepened every single day. And I get it now. I used to read it like, oh, we've lost our connection to nature. And it was still more cerebral, and I believed it. You know, I'm like, but I really feel like there needs to be some more messaging of like, go get your hands dirty. The soil is good for you, you know. But establishing that connection, and not just like kind of making a throwaway statement, but somehow really trying to cultivate that with images and words of how they can establish it. And like, I just wrote a novel, and it's about the character who is kind of like an alter ego. And I've tried myself within that creative piece to explain, like in a couple scenes, the best that I could, like what that might feel like for somebody. Like when they start to have that epiphany of like, oh shoot, like everything's moving and breathing without acid, you know, but to like go and hang out by a tree and then start to tune into that field of the tree and what that's like. And it can be kind of psychedelic. So yeah, I feel like there definitely needs to be more connection, messaging, and I don't know, I don't think that that's going to be something. I feel like it has to come from the people that actually know, which I think would be more our community. But you know, even if you work for like one of these big nonprofits, I mean, quite clearly, I think if they still have alarmist language, like those people don't have the connection, and that's okay, because I feel like I've been there. You know, like I was just kind of parroting the alarmist messaging, especially early on in my journey. So I guess my contribution is just like, how do we continue to, yeah, it's like connection, earth, feel energy, but be able to speak to that to different segments. Like go outside, just spend time outside, go breathe with a tree. I don't know.
It's a really interesting observation that you just said then, Janine, that if big nonprofits are using alarmist language, then they clearly don't have that strong connection to Earth, which I had never really thought about before. Does anyone else have any thoughts to reflect on that particular point?
I was just thinking about this in terms of that awareness. And if you're receiving the alarmist messages without being tapped into the consciousness of kind of, not consciousness, the awareness, I guess, of being connected and being part of the planet. So if your central nervous system is going off and you can't connect it to anything, it just tires you out. But if your central nervous system goes off, if you're getting some anxiety and you've got no idea, you just get really tired out. But if you're getting some anxiety and you can tap it into something in your body, something you're connected to, you're able to say, this means, you know, I've just been for a run and I need to have a rest, or I need to do something. I need to pay attention to the things that can help to calm me down. And maybe it's a similar kind of thing around that alarmist. So I just had that thought around that alarmist language.
For me, an alarmist is someone who is desperate. They're not grounded in where they're coming from. They don't have clear language, and they may not have a clear connection of who they're trying to reach or where they are currently. Because often for me, alarmist is someone who's just trying to grab you, shake you, scare you, get you automatically to do something, but they're not really helping you understand why you're trying to do that, or why it's important, or how, you know, what your best place is in that. It's just go run, you know, sign your pledge, give me $10, you know. So it's not really solving a problem. It's just maybe putting a Band-Aid on something.
I was thinking earlier as well, one of the important things is to ask, I know, who was it who said that they imagine, Janine, you imagined yourself as somebody that had only just had that epiphany. But I think it could be helpful also to put our mind in the shoes of somebody that hasn't yet got to that point and ask ourselves, what are the boundaries for that person? What are the boundaries for other people to accessing that space? And yeah, there's a lot of information out there about what to do once you are in that space, to say, okay, how do we understand the planet better? And how do we understand where to go from here? There's some amazing science around that, but to access that and want to access that, then you need to find out kind of, yeah, what those barriers are for people to move into that space.
That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. And from a communication standpoint, I've learned that there are usually 3 phases. There's just the awareness, we're helping to share education. And so they're going from oblivious to, oh, there's this thing, to then okay, I understand now there's this thing. So now they're in the second phase, to where they may have some interest in learning further. And then the third phase is actually engagement. It's where they've decided, okay, this is a thing. I know now what it is, and I can now do something about it. So you might actually think about wording for 3 different phases. So you're helping people at 3 different times of their journey.
Awesome, thank you, Anna. It's so good to have some of that communications theory in there as well. I'll just read back some of the things that, has everyone been keeping an eye on the chat? I feel like working on our communications narrative about the environmental problems is as important as working on the problem itself. Thank you, Fernanda. We need and Jonathan says we need a narrative of cooperating more. What our problem really is would be our inability to cooperate at scale, which results in all our ecological problems. Wow, that's a really cool reflection. Thank you, Jonathan. Rebecca's mentioned regulation theory and the window of tolerance. And Fernando has also tuned in with Jonathan saying that we need to focus on the solutions. Which I guess, Anna, would be that kind of, that the solutions part, would that be, the actual solutions would be in the engagement third of what you're talking about. But if you are wanting to first engage people with those solutions, you'd have to mention them, I guess, in the awareness space.
You would, but they wouldn't know what to do with it. They wouldn't,
yeah.
And they wouldn't know why they would want to do anything with it. Yeah, that's the whole thing, because literally this is unknown to them. It's like showing them the ocean, but they don't know what it is or what to do with it. Right? I mean, it's like they literally don't even know there's anything in it. So it's just helping them understand. I mean, that's why I think this is such a difficult conversation, is because it's literally so interconnected to every single thing about us, about our life, about everything on this planet. I mean, literally, right? And so that takes me back to Lumiel. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but the soil, right? And Janine, the soil, it literally, our life is from the soil. It purifies the water that goes into our aquifers. It brings down the carbon from the atmosphere. I mean, it's such a life force for us, but we don't know anything about it from a general standpoint, unless you're a soil health scientist or something. But then, you know, it's like everything is so specific and so detailed that it's a really hard conversation to start, because it's literally everything.
I guess that means we can be easy on ourselves, and at least we're starting. Go ahead, Meg, and then we'll hear from Vicus.
I was gonna share a quick bit, which is one of the things I've been thinking is possibly starting from the other direction, like just like when I think of, for example, bloom actions in a local neighborhood, I think of inviting neighbors and a garden together, and just a simple invitation to do something together and have an embodied experience with nature without having to put layers of like dogma or this is what's going on or fear or frame it, other than just building relationships with each other and the land directly. And that's almost like, to me, the other direction of going about it, and bypassing all of the, or like circuiting around all of the narrative divisions that are like so exacerbated by social media and marketing technology and political stuff.
Janine echoes your embodied experience with nature. Vicus, would you like to take the floor?
Hi everyone, this is Vikas. It's my first meeting with Bloom in a long time, but I'm glad to be here and hear about this topic. So some things that come to my mind are that it's really important to actually have this conversation about change the name of climate change, because of various reasons, especially because it's, I feel like when we talk about this topic, our major responsibility at this time is to change the perception of other people, like who, of the other side, like who do not believe in climate change. And that starts from the government itself, that there is like half of the people in the government who don't believe in climate change. So just talking about that, actually until 2014 or 2015, it was banned from the government communication from US White House that climate change cannot be used, by some of the people like who said that climate change is a big thing, but at the same time, we do not want to do anything about it. So it was banned from any official communication. And under Obama, it was actually, it started to change, but at the same time, I don't know where we stand right now. So having said that, as soon as we talk about climate change, people just believe like you are either pro climate change or against climate change, and that doesn't help in doing something or taking the conversation in a further direction. So it's really important to actually change the dialogue about that. Having said that, at the same time, I feel like another divide is that as an alarmist, people think that, oh, it's like a Democrat thing, that everything is an alarmist about climate change. And having said that, like in last few years, we have come to this place where even with correct data, it's hard to say what is the alarm, because we don't know something is happening in 20 years or 40 years or 45 years. So now I guess we are past that conversation where it can be an alarm, but we have to come into like something in the middle, because I agree that everything other people said, that we need to change the conversation about connecting to the nature. But at the end, like what does it mean, and how can we change that? So there's like two sides, because one side is like talking about climate change. Sometimes it feels like everything has to be done from the governmental bodies or organizations. For example, like use of plastic. I just personal sharing, like I moved to New York City 2 years ago, and I was like so shocked to see the use of plastic in the city, because nothing can just happen. Like, I mean, with all the food and everything packaging, the plastic use is so much. And when it comes to that, like I felt like something has to be done. But if it comes to like changing people's perception, it's almost impossible to change that thing in New York. So having like in last 2 years, there has been a lot of change. And recently in last 2 or 3 months, there has been a change in policy that use of plastic bags is completely banned in New York. Because of COVID, it has not been enforced yet. So that's a very big step towards climate change, that if at the government level we stop use of single-use plastic and completely change the perception of using like paper bags and paper straws. So in that's like one side of the conversation, where we do need bigger organizations like Greenpeace, or even as Bloom, we have to bring this change at the systemic level. So we keep moving this in organizational terms. But when it comes to like connection to nature, then it's more about like making more actionable items. For example, compost is one of the things which a lot of people still don't know about. Like, why should we do it? How do we do it? And in New York, it's still like a trendy thing, and a lot of people are aware of it. But in like 90% of US, it's almost impossible to even compost. So just having those kind of information is really nice. On the other side, someone mentioned Charles Eisenstein, so it reminded me of the story after he released his book on climate change, where he touched on this topic, where in a shamanic perspective, it said that to heal the planet, or to heal the waters and air of the planet, first of all, we have to heal ourselves inside. And once we heal the water inside us, the water of this planet will be healed too. So now that's a complete extreme. And he has just touched on this topic in his book. And just for that chapter, actually, he received a lot of criticism, because a lot of people said, so are you a climate change denier now? Because you are saying that nothing can be done from the government side, or like humans are not responsible, but it's the consciousness. So that's also another extreme which people don't like, because then they're like, oh, you're just denying what's being done and what's wrong in this planet right now. So something in between is, again, like to reinforce the connection to nature and to connection to um, like getting out of this separation and feeling that we are nature. So in that sense, like I feel like something one last thing which I want to say is that in last 1 year or like few months, there has been a lot of new study about how scientifically being in nature or being close to nature and plants and animals is like very healing for our brain and for the stress levels. And there's been some special organizations who are enhancing or like putting more emphasis on this. And now I saw that in some organizations it's mandatory that people take some time in nature, so they take like a weekly vacation even in some financial organizations and spend time in nature, so they are not as stressed as their job demands them to be. And one thing on those terms is one term which has been gaining a um, lot of like loss of words here, is this term called forest bathing, which has gained a lot of popularity in US recently. So that's something I feel like can be an actionable item even in like the local communities, that we take people on a 2 to 4 hours forest bathing trip where it's connecting to nature. And the concept of forest bathing is that once we are in the forest, we let go of ourselves and we actually become part of the forest. And it's not that we are completely silent, but even if we are talking as if we are talking with the plants and the animals of the forest. So that's something very helpful, and it also is spiritual but at the same time very scientific. So if we promote something like that in local communities and train people on how to lead forest bathing trips, there are a couple of books and online trainings. I think that can be a nice action from Bloom, because in the end, like as soon as I think of Bloom, I think of the poster, and it's like a girl just being in the forest and smelling um, flower or a fruit. So I think when we think about climate change, something like that in our statement would be more helpful to reinforce the connection with nature and be out in nature, and then talk about the other points secondary. Thank you.
That was a brilliant reflection, Vikas. Thank you. I wrote down a lot of what you said, did you actually say that you read somewhere that there were companies that were making people take mandatory forest breaks, or is that a suggestion that you were making? Oh, you've got your mute on.
No, I did hear about this. There was a particular term which I cannot remember right now, that they asked all the executives to take like a week in nature, just to be stress-free and be able to be more creative once they come back from the vacation.
Cool. Okay, we'll have to follow that one up. All right, Flavia, your turn. Can you remember what you're going to say?
Sort of. Yeah, I was gonna say something about what Vika's said, of looking inside, of getting healed first before actually doing anything else. And Otto Scharmer from Theory U, there's this phrase he says that we are collectively doing things no one wants to do it individually. So I think that that's what we have been doing, and to change this, I think it's also the individual. Each person should look and take care of their body and soul and spirit. I think most of this crisis is also spiritual. We are this lack of connection between ourselves and our spirit and nature is also, for me, I believe it's everything is related. And I think for us to really change uh, the way we are relating to the nature and to each other. And I also, so when we talk about narrative, I think it's important that it's not only nature, that also our social crisis influence climate change and climate justice. So I think it's important when we talk about indigenous tribes and racism and everything like that. And I don't know, I believe that we need to look inside and we need to look at our connection. So I think it's way more effective when a friend of yours or someone in your community talks to you and shows you their path of healing and changing, and it can affect you. So here in Brazil, some religions that have this culture, it's like I don't know, like a chain. Like one person is responsible for getting six other people in the group. It's like a chain, and I don't know. I think we should invent a chain like that. So focus on connection, real connection. So if ever people heal themselves and heal their relationships to people and nature, should mentorships, I don't know, some people, some else, I don't know, make it a wave out of this.
Cool, that's a beautiful picture that you're starting to form there, Flavia, of that chain between people and how we're connected. Love it. Janine, and then we might, so yeah, maybe have a couple more people, and then we will talk to Magenta and see if she's got some kind of feedback as to what the general picture is that's going on in the notes that she's been taking. So Janine.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to just kind of support what Flavia was saying. I think it is very important to look at racism, and because what I continue to see is kind of still like a colonizer consciousness that is coming out into these regions. And I understand that, like, I am a white presenting person living in a foreign country, you know, that hangs out with a bunch of expats that are also from colonizing nations, and we really don't. I mean, even the ones that are trying the hardest, it's like we still have so much to learn with that connection of you know, from like indigenous people. It's like there's ways to live without all the technology that we're just so accustomed to, like dishwashers and you know. And I say this stuff because, like, we have solar, but that, you know, it's like we did that, and now we're thinking, gosh, I don't know if that was the best decision necessarily. And I don't want to get into that, but there's all these ways that we kind of come in, people from modern societies, and there's a lot of language around that is actually by default kind of racist. It's been set up. It's very, you know, there's systemic racism in the words that, like, we're using, the way that we're looking at it, and presenting it to the world. And a lot of this has come to light from doing some work around racism, but also the work with, like, Cory Morningstar and the website like Wrong Kind of Green, and the No Deal for Nature. But there is this commoditization of nature happening, and I do feel like there's a lot of people with what they think are good intentions, but they're coming from this consciousness that is not connected. And so they're thinking, like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, we'll just go and buy land, and then, you know, parcel it out, and we'll make it a commodity and put that on the market. There's all these weird schemes coming to light, which may or may not work, but there's been issues, like I think in Brazil, Flavia, with like the RED programs and the RED Plus for the forest. Like, some indigenous people do not think that's working out well. And you know, like, we were just in Italy in October, right before the crisis hit there, and we went on this like hike tour thing for truffles, and it was in a private forest owned by like a UK company. And you know, it's things like that. Like, there's a lot of that happening that I think we're not paying attention to, partially because of alarmist language, and we're being distracted by other elements of what we think the problem is. And in the meanwhile, there's all these strange schemes that are coming into place that people think are a good thing, but it's coming from this like modern consciousness that is still not connected. And so we need to listen more and elevate the messages of indigenous people. You know. Yeah. Anyway.
Cool. Do a couple more people want to go? I think most people have had something to say, except for Jared. He might not tune in either. So I think he's just listening in the background while he's building new worlds. Yes. Otherwise, we will. So if anyone's got anything extra to say there, because we've gone past the hour, so I'm very conscious that we want to finish before the hour and a half. And obviously, this is just the beginning of a big chapter, just like Anna said. It is a big topic. We're not going to resolve it all today, but I think we're heading in a really interesting direction. So, Lumia, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of just echo that, yeah, just looking past simply changing our technologies and changing what things look like, and that this could be a really good opportunity to get more people to really ask those deeper questions about, yeah, our connection to the planet, and these ideas brought by, I guess, colonization, and the ideas of ownership, and all of these things that have been detrimental to, yeah, and the idea of you know, the supremacy of some beings over others, even within humanity, and what that means, that idea of domination and ownership, and these things that have crept in to the narrative that are not helpful at all. And yeah, I'm very glad that people are seeing this as an opportunity to question those things, and to ask ourselves, and to ask the questions of the cultures that still carry that knowledge, and the people that still carry that knowledge about how to connect in really honestly, and create that harmony with the planet. I just wanted to echo that. I've heard that from a few people, and yeah, I look forward to the conversations that everybody hopefully across the planet will have with regards to that.
Beautiful, thank you, Amy. One picture that's been jumping into my mind while people talk is culturally relevant here, probably not as culturally relevant in other countries, but is the picture of a human giving a tree a hongi. And the hongi is a Māori greeting that it's a little bit different depending on what tribe you come from, but the basic idea is you touch your nose and your forehead to another person's nose and forehead, and share a breath together. Beautiful greeting, and it really does ground you. When you're welcomed onto marae, you're expected to do that to everyone at the end of the ritual. But what I've been doing for at least 10 years, because I was doing it before my son was born, was doing that to the significant trees that I would encounter as I would walk through the forest, because it's that same idea of sharing breath with nature and becoming one with that tree. And you can definitely, if you have your left hand on the tree, you can feel that energy going through you. And if you really want to have fun, have a friend touch the tree with you, and then you touch your hand to each other, and you can feel the energy circulating through all of you. It's quite fun. But yes, so hongi is the name of it, Hongi. You could well have seen people do that if you've seen, I'll spell it for you. You know, it's something that we all grew up with here in New Zealand, and certainly if you're part of the Māori world, it is something that you do a lot. A wonderful sense of sharing energy with each other. And what was really interesting is when I was teaching people in this in America, the people who were doing it were all white, and they all just stood there and like drunk in the energy, like they were so thirsty. They've never felt that kind of energy before. In the Māori world, if you like did that for like 5 minutes, like some of these people were doing, you would be very weird. Some of the tribes, they just do it like a quick whoop. Other people, like the people up here, are much more like but certainly not for 5 minutes. So it's just really interesting, like when you finally get to tap into that that energy, just how powerfully people feel it. So, yeah. So that was a picture that's kind of been in my head and would be definitely relevant to people here. I'm not sure about.
It makes me wonder if it's culturally appropriate or if it could be communicated in a way that would be in integrity to share that image with people. It just makes me think of ways we can communicate and share experiences of this sort of thing as we utilize Bloom's communication channels to share healing imagery and voices from different people. Just a very nascent thought so far, but we're really trying to cultivate the network to be very participatory in that way of people contributing and sharing a diversity and multiplicity of voices of people's experience and that connectedness feeling somehow through media as well as in person.
Magenta, do you want to run us through what you think the themes are? I think Janine's kind of summed it up with trees and soil, and connection, or helping people connect to the land is definitely one that's talked about.
Yeah, I might have to like sit with the notes to pull them out. I took fairly detailed notes from everybody and pulled out throughout. People were mentioning action items, for example. But I feel like it would take me a moment to go through and pull out the themes, but I'm happy to send an email around afterward to help us just digest for the next conversation and continue the threads of this in the ways that we want to in our lives in between. Embodied experience with nature is definitely, that has been a theme throughout it, in the various ways that we can practice that and share it with other people. Yeah, fostering things that create that connection. And there were several ideas that were suggested, and I feel like that'd be a really fun thing to continue sharing ways
I was just
to
thinking that.
foster that. Still that question of what is a narrative that is irrefutable, although it seems like in answer to that emerged, or a response to that was that this almost like ineffable but like connected life / spiritual / direct contact, like reweaving our relationship with nature sort of thing. Yeah, there was that piece about strategic communications and recognizing where people are at in terms of pointing them to solutions. We may want to be mindful to recognize at what stage someone is at. The forest bathing thing. And not shying away from engaging with policy and the government approach as in parallel with the more kind of person-to-person stuff we can do. There's probably more, but those are a few of the like repeated themes that I heard. I'm sure I'm missing things.
Cool. So in the next couple of weeks, next week we'll get that written up into some kind of formed thing that we can share. Oh, there's a question. What was the question? I was thinking actually, how do we honor that without appropriation? Should we ask a tribe? Yes, I was thinking that it would definitely be something that we would talk to Māori people first before sharing that kind of branding, I guess. Yes, it'd be interesting to see how that conversation goes, actually. If that was decided, that we would just, that was something that we wanted to share as a picture. It was certainly something that I encourage you all to do when, if you see a giant tree, to go and give it a hongi and breathe it in. It feels real good. Or maybe if you're too weirded out, you block yourself from feeling the goodness. So watch out for that. I'm wondering if maybe with the people that we have on the call here, rather than talking about how we disseminate the information, because I think that was a conversation for later, it might be great to just end it off with talking to us, or giving everyone a chance here to talk about what they do to connect to nature, because I imagine that most of the people here are those kind of people that tap into the energy that is Mother Earth often, because that's what helps us to be grounded. So I shared one for me, going and honging, I don't think that's a word, but giving a hongi to a tree. I haven't done it for a while, actually. I'm going to go do that today. Janina, see that hand? Oh, your mute's on.
Not very good yet. Okay, so I design spaces around trees. I just started happening spontaneously, but I tend to, I don't know, fall in love with certain trees. And then I designed a fairy garden, like a fairy garden, you know, around one. That was like the theme that came to me. I'm like, I think this one needs a fairy garden. And then there's this big, beautiful tree that does this bloom that happens 1 to 3 days a year. Fabulous, magical tree. And so I designed like a pop-up festival around that one. And then there's another majestic tree in this area that I have designated for kind of like the feminine, like goddess temple area. And I'm planting some other trees, like kind of like just decorative trees to frame it in that area. So that's just one way. I don't know. I like to honor it by decorating with other plants and celebrating with presence, inviting people into the space.
That's great. I'm definitely a nature space maker as well. That's where I express my art the most, out in nature. Cool. Anyone else? How are you all connecting to nature? Sorry, I was just expecting you to zoom in there, Louie.
Oh, that's okay. I'm a tree hugger. I will be walking along and see a tree that just asks for a hug, and I just give out hugs freely. And I also have been thinking recently about whether trees know when we notice them and plants know when we notice them. So I've been trying to notice more plants around my neighborhood and really take the time to look at the leaves and to see them as they are, which sounds really potentially bizarre, but I think it's nice to be seen. And I think if there is such a thing as if panpsychism is for real, then yeah, just to let them know that I see them and I appreciate them in my daily life. Yeah.
Vikas, how do you connect to nature? Because clearly you've got a few things to say about that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a very bizarre person in that sense because I connect with nature a lot, all the time. Like, I feel like since COVID, I've been talking to nature more than human beings. In that sense, I feel like my ways of connecting is like one thing which has really helped me is to shape shift into nature, to actually feel what it feels to be a tree or to be a river or to be a mountain, especially if I've been going on nature hikes a lot. So actually understanding what it feels to be this mountain, which has been there for like millions of years, or a tree which has been there. So actually entering the tree and just being there, like, of course, hugging a tree, but feeling the roots of the tree and actually experiencing how it takes water from the roots, from the earth, and it's connected to this mycelial level. And then the water transplants from the earth to the tip of the leaves and becomes the dew. So it's like one of my most favorite things to do, like just to experience these things. And then being outside and merging with animals like squirrels and being in a park or like some weird nature creek or something, and just being one with the animals and do things like animals do, so you can become part of their kingdom and actually learn from different things. So when I talk about shape-shifting, like I feel like it's an indigenous thing of shape-shifting into an animal or a tree in order to gain the characteristics of this being. So for example, anytime I feel like I'm afraid and I'm not able to do things in life, or I'm scared for a meeting tomorrow, even if I'm not in nature, to kind of like journey into a natural space, or like something like my sacred space, I do a lot of journeys into nature and then shape shift into an animal, for example becoming a tiger or a jaguar, and then looking at that problem from the jaguar eyes. It's not in an analytical sense, but just being in the forest as if you are a jaguar for 10 minutes, or flying in the sky as a dragon. So it just changes the perspective towards everything. And then you come back into your own human self and you're like, whoa, what am I afraid of? Like everything is possible and anything can be done. So that's something like which helps me a lot. And apart from these things, like just connecting with water and air, like which is something we forget that that's part of nature too. Just sitting by the river and talking to water, and then trying to tap into the intelligence of water, because it's 80% of our human body and more like majority of this planet Earth, but still we feel like we don't understand water as much as it holds importance in our lives. So those are like some of the examples of how to connect with different elements, different nature beings and animals, birds. Um, I highly recommend reading books on trees. Like one of my favorite books is The Hidden Life of Trees. And then so many books on nature. Like something fascinating which I learned like 2-3 years ago was that not just trees talk to humans or other beings, but they're jealous like human beings. And they have more love for certain trees than other trees. And they make friendships that it's like scientific research now, so much research in the forest that actually if one tree dies, there is a tree like 10 trees further which provides all the nutrients for even like a fallen tree, so that it can still keep growing, whereas the other 5 or 6 trees next to it sometimes don't care. And then they did the research, like why is that? Because there is an affinity and maybe they were in love with each other, and then this tree actually take care of the baby trees of this old tree which gets cut. So there's like a hierarchy and like a relationship, which is something I never knew, and I felt like nature was supposed to be pure. But the more and more we learn, we feel like how we can learn from nature and how we can actually accept our humanness, because we are one with nature. In the same way, just learning more about birds, learning about how birds look at the world. For example, like just reading about, like there's this amazing book about like hawks, how they talk to each other and how they remember each and every animal, which each not an animal and human beings that come into the park. So I actually practiced this last year. Went for this forest bathing retreat in a rainforest in Washington State. So there I felt like I became friends with this hawk and a crow, that every day morning I would wake up, and as soon as I go outside, I would be greeted by this crow. And we would almost have a conversation, because this crow knows that no one comes to that part of the forest. And if we are just 6 people in that part of the forest, it just knew all of us. So in that sense, like I feel like we can learn so much from animals and birds and nature on how to connect to another human beings and how to solve big problems of this world, like climate change, which in our human terms it feels like it's a Herculean task and we cannot do anything about it. But then as soon as we shift our perception, everything is possible, and we kind of like become one of these magical beings which are capable of doing anything in this world. Thank you.
So delightful. Thank you, Vikas. Jonathan says he likes to stare at trees in the river, and that he has a fern on his desk that he sometimes stares at. Fernanda, I believe Vikas is in New York City right now, not India. And Magenta is waiting to your fern. Jonathan. Cool, got a couple of minutes. I'd love to hear from Rebecca and Flavia and Anna, if any of you want to share how you connect with nature.
Sure. Oh. Go ahead, Flavia.
Okay. I love to. I actually have moved near the beach, so to connect, I go down there and take a walk or swim. I love to be swimming in the ocean, or when I get the chance to be swimming in a river. I really consider myself a fish people, and I like to meditate, to go there and just sit and breathe and meditate and listen sounds of the ocean. That's my therapy, and my way to connect also to nature, and think about nature of all things, including myself.
Beautiful, thank you. Rebecca?
It's beautiful, Flavia. I love the ocean. I miss swimming in the water. I'm in Oakland, so it's a bit chilly up here. But I have some plants in the neighborhood that I go and visit. There's a tree I sit with in the morning, and there's like neighborhood cats that come up, and squirrels and turkeys over there. And I just came down through the 101 from Oregon and stopped through the Highway of the Giants, or the Avenue of the Giants, which is some of the older redwoods in California, and kind of just stopped and put my hand on them, and was just like, it'd been so long since I had visited one of those trees. I had that vibrational movement of like, oh, this is really intense. But yeah, just trying to sit with trees and meditate with trees and feel the connection to the earth, and so look up at the moon and the sun and remember my place in this universe. And yeah, love this conversation.
Yes, Bloom Network tends to find all the really interesting people. They all come out of the woodwork for these conversations. So thank you for joining us. I hope you'll come back. Anna, do you want to say anything?
Well, so I'm kind of a weird nut too. So during my undergrad, I went away to school for a few semesters, and I didn't know anyone. And so like the first 6 people I met were like my people, and we were like together then forever. And it was weird. There was a circle of oaks, and we created our own rituals in that space, and we each had like our own tree. We had everything that we would do in that space, but it was peaceful and it was slow, and whatever you did had to have a purpose. And I was very young, so it forced me to just be in the space and to like hear the wind through the trees, and even on the ground, it's like if there were worms like crawling through the leaves, or it was my introduction, if you will, to nature. And then now we live, like Flavia, really close to the ocean, and I absolutely love that space. I'm not as brave as you are, though, to where you're going in and swimming in the ocean. I know there are things in it, so I kind of just stay on the sand. But I have a balcony where we live, and so I have a full garden. We have tomatoes and green beans and all kinds of really cool things. And my pets here are lizards. I just love them.
Sorry, I missed where you were from, Anna.
Well, right now I'm on the East Coast in North Carolina, in Wilmington.
Cool. Thank you. Are there scary things in your water there? It sounds alarming.
Yeah, we have sharks. Yeah, we have, yeah.
You know, one of the things in New
I'm
Zealand
good.
is that there's literally nothing really in our country that can kill you. So you can walk around in bare feet in the forest and be concerned about sharp sticks, but that's about it.
Oh, I'm so jealous. That is awesome.
And then Australia, where everything's going to kill you. everywhere.
My friends have warned me when I visit the Amazon for the first time. They're like, Magenta, we know you like to touch everything, but don't touch anything. Enough of it's poisonous. Like, don't, just don't.
Oh, funny. Cool. All right. Well, let's. Is anyone got anything else to throw into the conversation before we close up the day?
This has been like the chillest, sweetest conversation about climate change ever. So sweet to get to know you all.
So gentle, and it's not alarmist at all. We're all very calm. We know the facts, but we're still here, present, showing up with calm minds and hearts. So it's beautiful. It's what we need, and that's what we want to communicate to the rest of the world. One thing I was reflecting on just before was that in Daniel Christian Wall's book, he talks about how when you're in that regenerative mindset, you understand that humans are part of the system, not separate from it. So that's probably something that we should include in that narrative as well. So the next steps for this call is that we will write a blog post and a wiki for it. And you'll get sent that through your email and also through the newsletter if you receive that. And oh, sorry, that was the vet calling me to find out whether I can get my rabbit spayed next week or not. I'll find out soon. I lost my train of thought. Oh yes, so we'll send out the information, and I think we'll definitely maybe have another conversation like this in the next little while, because it sounds like it's a good new ball rolling here. The next opportunity to tune in to a Bloom Network call is next Thursday, the last Thursday of the month, for Bloom Buds, where we just sit and smell the flowers together. It's at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Which allows you to find yourself a beverage if you wish to for Thirsty Thursday and just hang out with us. Wonderful to be part of this. Thank you all for being here. All Vikas, I see your hand. Do you want to say goodbye?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing which I forgot to mention earlier, is that especially these last few months, because of COVID, there has been such...
Oh, we've lost your sound, Vikas.
Oh yeah, sorry. So just wanted to add that because of COVID, how there has been the least pollution on this planet, and especially in terms of environmental science, there has been so much new research, because in terms of environment science, we didn't know that we could reach this less level of carbon monoxide in the environment, or how the levels of pollution could be this low. So now that we have come to this understanding, I feel like in environmental science, there is so much new research on how to actually gain these levels of pollution, or like, I mean, how to be at this level in coming years. So in coming few months, or within next year, I feel like there's going to be a lot of articles and a lot of new research coming from different parts of the world. And it would be nice to actually promote that as part of Bloom, and inspire more people to get into that bandwagon, basically, you know. So yeah, just wanted to throw it in.
Awesome, thank you, Vikas. All right, I'll just quickly close this in a moment of silence. As we sit here in this moment, thankful for this conversation coming forward. Taking 3 deep breaths. Breathe that conversation in. Find the conversation that is happened here into ourselves. One more breath. Bring a smile to your face at the resolve that you've had to this conversation. You're here. Now you're also smiling at everyone else. Thank you all for this call, and we'll be in touch soon. For those of you who are new, you will get jumped into our online portals of Hilo, which are a little bit slow at the moment, but maybe this will actually help us get into that. Might be a good place to start the conversation in the climate change thread. Awesome. Have an excellent day, everyone, or evening, depending on where you are. And see you all soon. Bye.
See you, sweet beings.
Bye, gorgeous.